Good evening, everyone. And tonight I am dedicating the class לעילוי, נשמת, Karen בת לבנה, יוטה וחיים. That's Karen Bell Eisenberg. She passed away a couple weeks ago, unexpectedly. She's a tremendous loss. She's a tremendous loss. So I wanted to dedicate this class to her. Giving some background just to remind you where we're all at. We are continuing with Elisha. And Elisha he is now about to embark on what has been hinted to us since Eliyahu, because the stuff that Eliyahu, remember I said, what Eliyahu was supposed to do is what Elisha ends up doing. In other words, ushering in the rulers of a new generation. Okay, so what does that mean? So I'm going to pick up right from where we left off. I'll share my screen as usual. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. All right, so where we left off was in 2 Kings chapter 7, Melachim Bet Zion, where we had the end of the siege, right? There was this horrible siege, horrible famine that miraculously ended. And Elisha said it would end, but what this showed was kind of the divine power, right? That God can come through even when it seems impossible. And then what we move on to is kind of a little minor story. It's almost a transitional story where Elisha, we have kind of a redux of the Shunammite woman, right? The Shunammite woman, the Shunammite. So Elisha speaks to the woman whose son he gave life to, right? Kumi uluchi at uveitech v'guri b'asher taguri. You go with your household, live wherever you need to live. Ki kara Hashem l'ra'av v'gam ba el ha'aretz sheva shanim. God has called for a famine, and that's come into the land for 7 years. Now, this is perhaps meant to contrast with Eliyahu's behavior when there was a similar famine where Eliyahu just went on his own and he didn't bother with anyone pretty much. Like he went, he was a little bit up north, dealing with non-Israelites. But one of the things Elisha does is, here's this woman that he has this connection to, and he says, you need to go and find a new place because there's a famine coming, okay? Now, that's exactly what she does. She goes and she lives in the land of the Plishtim. The land of the Plishtim here is the area near the coast, okay? We do have situations where a famine will reach northern Israel, but the rain doesn't fall over northern Israel, but it does reach the area to the southwest, right? The rain doesn't fall over the north, but it does get to the southwest. Apparently, that is a situation. We see that biblically with Avram, okay, who also does a similar thing where he goes to that area of the country to get away from a famine. So that's what she does. And then what happens is after 7 years, she comes back and she goes, now this is a different type of, I want to say something, you're going to automatically say, oh, she's looking for special justice from the king. She's not looking for special justice from the king. Give me just a moment. We'll talk about what happened. She goes, she goes to cry out to the king over her house and over her field. What apparently happened? Apparently, she left her land for 7 years, and the king either took possession of it because this was land that wasn't being used. The king said, "Okay, I'm taking it," or this was the sort of thing where it would revert to the king if it wasn't used. So now the king has the land because you can see there's no other person involved here besides her and the king. She's not bringing a court case against someone else who took over. She left it, and now she needs to get it back from the king. So the king is speaking to Gehazi. Now this is interesting because Gehazi should not be able to hang out with the king if he's a leper, right? And what it seems like from this is that he is no longer a leper. That's what it sounds. It sounds like it wore off, right? Even though it shouldn't have, right? But the king is speaking to Gehazi, who is, again, Na'ar Ish Elohim. He's the servant of the man of God. And he says, and he's telling him, so she's coming in to plead her case. And meanwhile, the king's saying to Gehazi, tell me stories about Elisha. Tell me about all the great stuff Elisha did. All right. So one of the things that's interesting here is there are stories about Elisha at this point, right? When you say, oh, where did these stories come from in 2 Kings that we have? When we were talking about how it looks like there are some stories that aren't included with Eliyahu, things like that. Well, these stories were being told and then they're being collected. So these stories of Elisha are being collected. We have a lot of stories. We actually seem to have more stories about Elisha than we have about Eliyahu. They just go on and on and on. And it's already in the idea of this statement is that already in his lifetime, these stories are being collected and told and retold. And the king wants to hear them from Gehazi because he's kind of a fanboy, all right? And he's telling him about how Elisha brought the dead person back to life and who should come but the woman whose son he in fact brought back to life, crying out to the king for her house and for her field. And Gehazi says, this is the woman, it's her son that Elisha brought back to life. And the king says to the woman, he gives her one kind of officer. A saris does not have to be a eunuch, right? A saris is kind of can be an officer. He gives her an officer saying, give her back all her stuff, including the crops that have been since she left until now, which is showing that he's not just doing justice here, he's being nice, right? Because she has a special status of this connection to Elisha, he's giving her more than she really deserves. Even if he ruled in her favor, he's giving her all the crops from the 7 years she wasn't there. Okay, a nice little interlude. And now we are going to get to where Elisha is doing the job that Eliyahu was given way back when. Let's take a look let's remember that job. Here we are, okay? In 1 Kings 19, it's Malachim Aleph Yud Tet, okay? Verses 15 to 16, Tet Vav to Tet Zayin, okay? This is when God kind of gives Eliyahu the chance to change the way he's describing the situation. And Eliyahu doesn't take it. So he says to him, Lech. So God says to him, Lech shuv l'darkecha midbara Damascus. He says, go back to your path, go to Damascus. Uvata umashachta et Hazael lemelech Aram. And you should anoint Hazael a king over the Arameans. Vet Yehu ben Nimshi timshach lemelech Israel. And Yehu, the son of Nimshi, you should anoint as a king over Israel. Ve'et Elisha ben Shaphat me'avel mecholat timshach lenavi tachtecha. And appoint Elisha ben Shaphat to be a prophet instead of you. So the only thing he does is he gets Elisha, and then that's it. We don't hear any more of the others. Why do we not hear any more of the others? Perhaps, and this was just a theory that I proposed, maybe just because it doesn't work chronologically. In other words, it doesn't work chronologically in terms of what we know when Elisha operated. It doesn't work. So whoever was collecting the stories was like, this is an important thing, but it's hard to say, but we're gonna use the story with Elisha doing it and not the story with Eliyahu doing it. It's hard to believe that this was part of a cycle of stories where Eliyahu just totally ignored this stuff, right? I would expect a cycle of stories where Eliyahu then did this. Okay. So let's go back to our current story. All right. So what happens? Vayomer Hazael. Sorry, I didn't say they have to start. Okay, from the beginning. Here we are. So Elisha goes to Damascus, right? This isn't Eliyahu going to Damascus. Elisha goes to Damascus. Uven Hadad Melech Aram Choleh. Ben Hadad, the king of Aram, is sick. Now, this would not be, we had the question last week. I think Ido is not with us now, so it's a shame because it was his question. But hey, there you are, Ido. Hi, okay, great. So this is the story. We have 3 Ben-Hadads, okay? This one is actually probably Hadad Ezer, okay? The first Ben-Hadad, we don't have any outside evidence of him particularly, unless you go by Albright, felt that the Melkart Stela was talking about, which talks about a king whose name is Bir Hadad, that is Bar Hadad, that is Ben Hadad, right? So he was like, this is the first one. But most people don't think that it's that Ben Hadad. They think it's a Ben Hadad who wasn't in Damascus, was in a different area. The Zakur inscription talks about Bar Hadad, the son of Hazael. That's the third Ben Hadad. This guy, it looks like he's actually Hadad Ezer, okay, who we do have reference to in Akkadian documents as Adad Idri. Hadad Ezer, Adad Idri, right? So this is actually probably Hadad Ezer. And so Elisha comes to Damascus, and Ben Hadad, the king of Aram, is sick. And they tell him, oh, look, the man of God has come. Vayomer HaMelech El Hazael, Kach biyadcha mincha, v'lech likrat ish Elohim. So the king says to Hazael, right, who's like his right-hand man, he says to him, go, take a present and go meet the man of God. V'darash et Hashem yoto lemor, hachia b'chol izeh. And so he should ask the Israelite God, am I going to live from this illness? So that's exactly what Hazael does. He takes him all the best stuff from Damascus. He brings him enough for 40 camels to carry, and he stands before him and he says, your son, Bincha ben Hadad melech Aram shalchani elecha, your son, Ben Hadad, king of Aram, sent me to you, saying, ha'echye micholi zeh, will I live from this sickness? Vayomer elav Elisha, and Elisha says an interesting sentence. He said, lech emor lo chayotichye, vir'ani Adonai kimot yamut. He says to him, go tell him you shall live, and God has shown me that he's going to die. Okay. Now, what does this mean? What's going on? We'll see what the double language is going to mean in a bit. Vayamed panav vayasem adbosh vayef ish Elohim. So he was trying. So apparently Elisha's trying to keep it together until he can't anymore, and he starts crying. Vayomer Hazael madua adoni boche. So Hazael says, why is my master crying? Vayomer ki adati tasher tasel libnei Israel ra'am tzarem tishalach ba'esh ubachorem b'cherev tarog v'olem teratesh v'rotem tevakeh. Because I know what you're going to do to the children of Israel. Evil, right? You're going to burn down their fortresses, and you're going to kill the young men by the sword. You're going to smash their babies, and you are going to split open their pregnant women. Okay, like you are going to be tremendously violent, and you are going to just. Now the fact is, Hazael is going to be, from the point of view of Aram, a very successful king. He's going to do a lot of conquering, and in fact, he really is. This is the beginning of a really hard time for Israel. Vayomer Hazael, Kima avdecha hakelev ki aseh hadavar hagadol hazeh. So Hazael says, what is your servant, the dog who can do this great thing? Vayomer Elisha, hir'ani Hashem otcha melech al Aram. And Elisha said, God showed me you as king over Aram. Now he's setting it up, right? So this is like the first kind of Macbeth moment that we have in these things. He's setting it up because he said to him, tell your master, tell the king that he's going to live, but I'm telling you he's going to die. All right. So he takes that as, okay, he's going to live from his illness. He doesn't say, oh, he's going to die from his illness and I'm going to be killing him. He takes it as maybe he'll live from his illness. But he's going to die. He's going to die. So he goes from Elisha. So he went to his master, the king, and he said, what did Elisha tell you? And he said, you will surely live. So he took a piece of cloth, he put it in water, and he put it over his mouth. So it's like that. I think it's like dry drowning or something. I think that's, but at the very least, he's like strangling him. He can't get any air in, and he dies. And Hazael rules instead of him. Okay, so what Elisha said happened. All right. So now we have Hazael as the king. Uv'shnat chamesh leYoram ben Achav melech Yisrael. Yoshaphat melech Yehuda, Malach Yoram ben Yoshaphat melech Yehuda. Okay, so now we have a change in rulers in Yehuda. So what we have, the important thing here is that there's now, okay, so this is what happens. So you have Yoram ben Achav is the king of Israel, all right? Yehoram, the son of Yoshaphat, is ruler, all right? And he does what Achav did. Why? Because he takes as a wife a daughter of Achav. He marries Atalia. So the new king of Yehuda is married to Atalia or Atalyahu, who is the daughter of Achav. Okay, so now the two royal houses are linked by family, and they're linked by a fairly Baal worshiping side of the family. All right, so it's Atalia. He takes Atalia as a wife, so he worships Baal. All right, and he does the bad in the eyes of God. So God wasn't going to destroy him for that, as opposed to Achav, whose house is going to be destroyed for this. He doesn't want to destroy the house of David because the house of David has to continue. During this time, Edom rebels, okay? And for the first time since David, they rebel enough that they can put a king over them. So Edom is out of Yehuda's control. So and Ad Hayom Hazeh is until the time of Yoshiyahu, more or less, right? Until they rebel until this day. What is this day? This day being the time of Yoshiyahu. Okay, et cetera, then Yoram dies, and Achaziyahu, his son, rules under him. So again, so who's ruling in Yehuda now? This is kind of important. The person who's ruling in Yehuda now is Achaziyahu, the son of Atalia, the daughter of Achav. She's also sometimes called the daughter of Omri, but that's because she's the granddaughter of Omri. The same way Lavan ben Betuel is sometimes called Lavan ben Nahor, right? Because he's the grandson of Nahor. Okay. All right, so now you have Achaziyahu ben Yoram is king over Yehuda. I'll explain why this is important later, okay? And his mother is Atalyahu bat Omri melech Yisrael, right? She's the daughter, she's the granddaughter, really, of Omri, the king of Israel. She's the continuation of the line of Omri Achav. It's considered this evil line, right? Evil, but very, very successful politically, all right? So, Vayelech b'derech bet Achav v'yas hara b'nei Hashem kebet Achav ki chatan bet Achavu. So the new king, who's the son of Atalia, he continues apparently to worship Baal because he's continuing the traditions of the house of Achav. Now, Yoram, the son of Achav, we're going back to king of Israel, he goes to war against Hazael, the king of Aram, right? And he gets very badly hurt. So he goes back to Israel to be cured, all right, from all his wounds, all right? And who goes to visit him? Well, his nephew, right? The king of Yehuda goes to visit him. So you've got in one place, we're setting up the scene, right? So in one place, you've got the king of Israel, right? Who is the son of Achav. You have his nephew, who is the grandson of Achav, who is the king of Yehuda. They're both in the same place in Israel. So at this time, what is going to happen? We're going to have the second part of the kind of Elisha's destiny, you could say, right? Except Elisha can't do this himself. We'll see why. And I see there are questions. So I'm pausing here. Let me see what the questions are. Here. Could this Gehazi story have taken place before Gehazi was cursed with leprosy? It could have, because I don't think the Naaman story is not good. The Naaman story, it even just says, I think, the king of Israel. We don't even know which king of Israel it is, I think, with the Naaman story. So in theory, you could have the Gehazi story before he got leprosy. Yes. The Gehazi story here that we read where he's with the king, that could have been before he got leprosy, I believe. Yeah, I think that would work. Susan asks, did Hazael murder Ben-Hadad, or did Ben-Hadad actually accidentally kill himself? No, it says Hazael murdered him. Hazael did it. It's Hazael murdered Ben-Hadad. Okay, it's very, very, very clear. He's the one who put the cloth on him. No sick guy is going to say, hey, I'm just going to strangle myself to death with this wet cloth. No, because it was over his mouth. It was over his whole face. He wouldn't have done that. So no, Hazael killed him. It's very clearly that Hazael killed him. Okay. So, all right. So at this time, Elisha calls to one of the sons of the prophets, right? One of these groups of prophets. He says, okay, gird your loins, take this little bottle of oil and go to Ramot Gilad. Okay, this is something you have to do in secret. You're going to have to go. You're going to say Yehu, the son of Yehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. You're going to go. You're going to take it out from among his fellows, and you're going to bring him to an internal room. Bring him to an internal room inside a room. No one's an inner chamber, like an inner chamber is the better translation, so that no one will see what you're doing. Take the little bottle of oil, pour it on his head. You are anointing him, right? And you say, so says God, I have anointed you as a king over Israel. And open the door and run. Don't wait. In other words, do this thing, anoint him, and then you just run out, because this is a dangerous place to be. You just got to get out, okay? That's exactly what he does. He comes and he says, and all the main officers of the army are sitting there, and he says, he says, he says, I have something for Hasar, the officer, and Yehu says, which one of us? And he says, you. Apparently he knows who Yehu is. And they go into the house, he pours oil on his head, and he says more than he was, when we saw he was told to say. We can assume he was told the whole thing. He says, Ka amar Hashem el Yisrael, mishachticha lemelch el am Hashem el Yisrael. So says the Lord God of Israel. So you can see this is already much longer than the formula we saw from Elisha. The Lord God of Israel, I have anointed you for king over the nation of God, of Israel. Okay, so there again, this nation of God, right? So you already see that there's a little bit more here. V'hikita et bet achav adonecha v'nikamti dmei avadai haneviim udmei kol avdei Hashem miyad Izebel. And you should smite the house of Achav, your master, and I, God, right, will have revenge for the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of God from the hand of Izebel. Izebel, by the way, is still alive, as we shall see, right? So Izebel's survived this whole time with all these different kings, because she's not going to war. They generally are killed in war, and she's okay. She's at home in the harem. Va'avad kol bet Achav v'chrati la'achav mashtin bekir v'atzur v'azuv b'Yisrael. So, and the whole house of Achav should be lost, should be destroyed, and I will cut off from Achav any male, right? Mashtin bakir means anyone who, pishes on the wall. That's any male. So when they say that, they mean any from an infant. What they mean is any age male should be gone, should be dead, right? And anyone who is either locked up or left abroad in Israel, they should all be gone. And the house of Achav will be like the house of Yeravam ben Nevat and like the house of Baasha ben Achia. Those are previous houses of kings in Israel that did not continue, as opposed to the house of Omri and Achav that has really had a dynasty. Okay, but they're going to be wiped out. And he finishes the prophecy. He says, and Izebel, the dogs will eat in the portion of Israel, and there will be no one to bury her. And then this or maybe not young prophet opens the door and runs, right? So the prophet gave this long prophecy and he runs out. I see that there's a question here. Oh, Robin's sharing a link.
It's not a question. It's just the archaeological evidence actually exists for this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yehu's the name Nimshi.
With the name Nimshi in Tel Rehov in the right place, and the inscription of a name Elisha in that place.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. So everyone who you look in the comments and you can kind of click through to the is it the Eretz Yisrael Museum?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit old. I'm sure there's more information nowadays.
Yeah. Thanks, Robin. Okay. So here he's passed this on, and now and then he runs. Now it's up to Yehu. Okay. And Yehu yatzal abdei Adonav vayomer lo hashalom madua ba hamishuga Hazael and Yehu. So Yehu comes out to the servants of his master. In other words, the other guys, the other officers, whatever. And he says, is it, one of them says, so is everything well? Why did that crazy person come to you? Right? Because prophets, they look a little nutty and they're nuts, right? He's like, this guy, he said stuff, big deal. They're like, no, that's not true. This is clearly important. Haged na lanu, tell us. So it doesn't take him long to tell them. He says, this is what he said. He said, God has anointed you to be king over Israel. They're all ready for a new king. Clearly, this is the time. Everyone's pretty much sick of this one, it seems like. And so they very quickly, each one takes his clothes off. They put it under him on the stairs. So I guess he can sit there like a throne, right? And they blow in the shofar and they say, Yehu is king. Yehu rules. All right. And so Yehu has a plot against Yoram. Yoram is in Ramot Gilad. He's kind of watching out him with the rest of Israel. They're kind of guarding against Hazael, the king of Aram. Who remember was also anointed by Elisha, or at least chosen, at least told, kind of chosen as king, or told that he's going to be king by Elisha. So again, Yoram is being cured in Israel from his wounds that he got fighting Aram, and Yehu says, don't. So he says, if any of you guys go out of the city and tell what's going on, tell him in Israel, you're dead, right? Like if you care about your soul, like if you want to stay alive, no one's coming out. Okay, so Yehu goes. So no one's coming out from where Yehu is because they all heard that Yehu now wants to be king. All right, so no one can leave the city. So Yehu goes to Israel, and because Yoram is lying sick there. Ahaziah, the king of Yehuda, is there with Yoram. Okay. All right. And the guardsman is standing on the Tower of Israel, and he sees Shifat Yehu Bevo'o, right? He sees the it seems like the group with Yehu when he comes, and he says, I see people coming. Vayomer Yoram kach rakav ushlach lekartam v'yomar shalom. Send a chariot rider to go and say, is everything well? So he goes out and he says, is everything well? And Yehu is like, Malacha u'lishalom. What's between you and like peace and well-being? You turn and come after me, right? So the watcher, meanwhile, is telling the king, and he's like, the guy went to him and he didn't come back, right? And it happens again, right? And again, he says, go behind me. And he goes behind me. He doesn't go back to the king, right? So he doesn't want to give the king any sort of warning about what's going on. And he just tells them, just follow me. And apparently he's already enough of a leader that they just listen to him, right? There's really no reason why they should listen to him, it seems like, but they just do. But the second time, but he's getting closer and closer. So the watcher says, okay, this one also got to them and didn't come back. But whoever's driving this chariot, it looks like it's Yehu ben Nimshi because he drives like a crazy person. Okay, he drives crazily. So apparently Yehu's already known as like a crazy driver. We, the readers, know that we're in for a wild ride, right? We are in fact in a wild ride. Yehu doesn't meet anyone he doesn't want to kill. And that's generally what he does. So what we have now, then we're going to start on is just a general kind of there are points that you could really call a massacre, right? The question always is this all positive? Is any of this negative? What's going on here? So what happens is, okay, so when Yoram says Yehu, so the king goes out to meet him, right? And he says to Yehu, is everything okay, Yehu? Hashalom, Yehu? Is everything well? Vayomer ma hashalom adznunei izevel imcha uchshaveha harabim. He's like, what can be well with the prostitutions of Izebel, your mother, and her many magics, right? Her many sorceries. Vayafoch Yoram, that you don't have to say much more than that to Yoram. It looks like it takes a while for things to kind of sink in, but that pretty much does it. Vayafoch Yoram yadav vayanos. Vayomer el Hazael. Oops, that went back. What happened? Hold on. Just a sec. It went. Let me go back. Sorry. Here we are. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Okay. So Yoram turns tail and flees, and he says to Achaziahu, Mirma Achazia, right? There's treachery, Achazia. We both need to run, right? So Yehu kills him in his carriage. He shoots him with an arrow, kills him in his carriage, and then he says to Bidkar's his captain, go and throw him in the field of Yisrael. Ki zechor ani v'ata et rochvim tzmadim achrei achavich. V'viv Hashem nasa alav et masas. This is what he's going to get because of what Achav, his father, did. Because of imlo et dmei navot vet dmei vanav ra'iti emesh num Hashem v'shilamti lecha b'chelka hazot nu'um Hashem v'tasa shechel b'chelka kidvar Hashem. So he's quoting an old prophecy, right? That God said that the blood of Navot and the blood of his sons are going to be paid back in this plot, right? So now in this plot of land, and so now throw him in the plot of land. This because he's paying for Achav's sins. So Achaziah, king of Yehuda, he goes and he runs through Beit Hagan. Some think this is Jenin. Okay, so Yehu runs after him and he says, "Get him also, like, while he's in the chariot, right?" And so they get him, they hurt him, but he manages to make it to Megiddo, and then that's where he dies. And then his servants take him and they bury him in Jerusalem. After all, he is a king of Yehuda who gets buried in Jerusalem. Now, the important thing, so hold on just a second, right? So where did he get this command? He killed the king of Yehuda. He didn't have to. He could have let him run, right? He wasn't threatening him. He was running back. He was going to run home to Yehuda. What right did he have to kill that kid? So the question is, and I think it's an open question. It's an open question. Is this supposed to tell us, you know what? He's already overstepping. Like, this is a guy who likes killing, right? He likes killing a little bit too much. Or are you saying, well, he's interpreting this as being part of the household of Achav? This guy's mother is Achav's daughter. He is a grandson of Achav, right? So if he's a grandson of Achav and I have to wipe out the house of Achav and I'm not supposed to leave a single male from it, well, this guy's dead. Now, it doesn't hurt that what would probably happen, I mean, if let's say he leaves him alive, okay? He leaves the king of Yehuda alive and well. King of Yehuda goes back to Yehuda. What's the next thing that happens? What's the next thing that happens? One would assume the king of Yehuda is going to make a move against this guy who killed his uncle and destroyed an alliance, right? I mean, that's what they're allied. They're not just their relatives, and they're allied kings. It would make sense for the next thing for him to do is attack and get rid of Yehu, right? It would make sense. So politically, if you're for Yehu's future, or let's say not even politically, just for his future survival, you could understand why Yehu would want to kill this guy, right? Say, hey, look, this guy's got to die too, regardless of prophecies. So there are different options here. But he does kind of seem to be in the mood for killing. That mood does not pass by anytime quickly. All right. So now I know this isn't Elisha, but this is kind of this big important change in this is possibly the longest story in Kings. This is like the longest, like single scene described, like consecutive, where things are happening one after the other. It just goes on and on and on. He does lots of killing. I'm sorry, like I know I keep saying that, but it's just true. That's if I had to say one line, I'd be like, Yehu kills everyone. So who's he going to kill next? Not a big surprise. He goes to Israel, and he's going to kill Hazael, right? So Hazael hears it, and what's nice is that you have you get a kind of a sense of Hazael, which you got little glimmers of her before, but you really get a sense of her here. V'Hazael sham'a v'tasem b'puch eineha v'teitevet rosha v'tashkef b'ad ha'chalon. She knows what's coming. She puts on her makeup and she looks out the window, right? She puts on her eyeshadow, she does her face, and she looks out the window. She's a queen, right? Vayehu bahashar vatomer hashalom zimri horeg adonav, right? She says to Yehu comes to the gate, and she says, "Oh, is all well?" Zimri, who killed his master. Now Zimri is the guy who killed Baasha. Zimri had a few days of rule. So like that's kind of hinting also, not only you're like him and you're not going to rule long. Wrong, he's going to get a dynasty, but he's going to get, I think, the longest dynasty that Israel has, that the northern kingdom of Israel has. Vayisap hanav el chalon vayomer mi iti mi, and he looks at there. Again, Yehu has this power of leadership where he just tells people to do things and they do it. Like this is consistently the case. He says, just join me, and they just join him. So he says, who's with me, right? And vayishkifu elav shnaim shlosha sarisim. So there are a few officers, or important personages who serve in the palace. Again, probably not actual eunuchs, right? Looking out. And vayomer shimtuha vayishmetuha. He says, throw her down, right? Throw her out. And they throw her out. Vayiz midama el hakir vel hasusim vayirmesena. As she goes down, as she hits, I guess, her blood splashes on the wall and on the horses, but Yehu doesn't care. He tramples over her just to be sure. Okay. Vayavo vayochal vayesht, and he goes and he eats and drinks. Vayomer pikduna et harura hazot b'kivruha kivat melachi. He says, you know what? Go and get her. Go get this cursed woman and bury her, because she's a princess, right? Which is after he eats, right? Like the whole thing is, wow. They go to bury her. So all they find is her skull and her feet and her hands. So they go and they tell him, he says, this is as the word of God, right? He said to Eliyahu that in the area of Yisrael, the dogs will eat the flesh of Hazael. The carcass of Hazael will be like dung on over the field of Israel. Asher lo yomru zot Hazael. So they won't say this is Hazael. This is Hazael's resting place. There's going to be no place to point to say this is where Hazael was buried. So the royal house seems to be dead, but they're not, right? Because we have more people to die and be killed by Yehu. Now, I think that maybe I should just summarize this one because it keeps going and going and going and going and going and going and going. All right. So I'm gonna maybe, do you mind if I just summarize it? And yeah, let's just summarize it. Okay. So I'm going to stop my share here. You feel free, to look it up and read all the details. So the next one, and I am going to point to certain psukim. So Achav has 70 sons. It says Achav has 70 sons in Shomron. Okay, now remember, he's supposed to kill all the males. And anyway, it looks like he kind of enjoys it anyway. So Yehu wrote letters. Sorry, that's a judgment, but it kind of does. So Yehu wrote letters and he sends to Shomron and he says to the elders, and it says specifically, the elders, ve'el ha'omnim achav, they're like the nannies, for a better word. They brought up these kids, right? It makes it clear more than once. All right. So they say, so essentially he says, he says, he says like this. If you're mine and you listen to my voice, take the heads of the people who are the sons of your master and come to me at this time tomorrow, right? And the sons of the king are 70 men with the heads of the city who raised them, okay? So the idea is, here they are. They were raised by these guys, and here in this case, it gives you a kind of a prequel saying why they're so scared. They're genuinely scared of him. They don't want to just do what he says, but they're really scared. And he says, "Okay, bring me the heads of these guys." You could read it either "bring me the guys" or "bring me their heads." So how do you think they read it? Guess. Heads in a basket, right? They're like, okay, we're bringing the heads in a basket. No possibility of misunderstanding. And they bring it to him. And so what he does is he puts them in piles, 2 piles on either side of the gate. Actually, this is something that we know from like Assyrian inscriptions and stuff like that. This is something that they would do as kind of when they would subdue a city, right? This is something they would do to, they take the dead and take the skulls and kind of pile them up on either side and as a way of showing, scaring them. But he piles them up on both sides. Everyone comes out and he says this. He says, so in the morning, right, he comes out and he stands and he says to the whole nation, to all the people, Tzadikim atem, you are blameless. Hine ani kasharti al Adoni. I had a plot against my master. I betrayed my master. Ve'ergeu, and I killed him. Umihi kat kol ela, and who killed all of these? I'm going to come back to this. So know that nothing that nothing from God's word falls to earth without coming true, right? That which God spoke about the house of Achav, and God did what He said through His servant Eliyahu. Okay, so what's going on here? He sets it up so that you're either going to accept responsibility or you're going to have to say the whole thing's from God, right? Because, I killed my master. Who killed these guys? You guys are blameless. Who killed these 70 people that were raised by the heads of the city? Must be from God, right? Because you're blameless. So this whole thing's from God, right? The whole thing's from God. Like if this is from God, then I'm from God. Like the whole thing's from God now. So you have to kind of accept that I'm the king and this is from God. All right, he's kind of set it up that way. This is Yehu's fun sense of humor. Sorry, I have issues with Yehu. In case you haven't noticed, I have little issues with Yehu. Okay, so what's next for Yehu? Then what he does is he kills everyone else. It says so Yehu, Yehu kills everyone who was left of the house of Achav in Israel. V'chol gdolav umiyudaav v'chohanav al bilti hishir lo sarid. All Achav's great people and all his acquaintances, his friends and his kohanim, his priests, until not a remnant was left. Now here he's clearly going beyond the prophecy, right? The prophecy didn't say kill anyone who was a friend of Achav, but it makes a lot of sense for Yehu to do that. In order for Yehu to be able to rule safely and securely, his best bet is to make sure everyone is dead, and that is what he is doing. Okay, next step. Now he's going to do. Now I'm going to share my screen now because now it's the religious part. All right. Okay. All right. So here, we're reading from okay, so let's read from here. From Pasuk Tetvav, from verse 15. Okay, so he finds Yehonadav, the son of Rechav, coming to meet him, and he says, is your heart with me? Essentially, are you with me? Yehonadav says, yep, I'm with you. Give me your hand, and he gives him his hand. He brings him up on his chariot. Come with me, and you'll see my zealousness for God. Now here, this is going to be a move where he kills people simply for religious reasons. Before, he was killing people because it made sense for his rule. Now he's going to be killing people for religious reasons. Put him in his chariot. Okay. And again, he comes to Shamron. He kills everyone who's left from Achav, as God spoke. And then Yehu gathers all the people. And what does he say to them? He says, Achav avad Baal ma'at, Yehu yavdenu harbe. Achav served Baal a little. I'm going to serve him a lot. We are all like, oh, what? Right? No, not to worry. What does he do? He calls anyone who's at all interested in serving Baal. He brings all of them. He's like, okay, we're going to do this big sacrifice to Baal. Everyone come. And he calls a holiday. And so he sends out throughout the whole, and everyone who serves Baal, all the people who worship Baal, are coming because they're having this big holiday for Baal. They all come to the temple of Baal. Okay. And they take out, special clothing and all this stuff. Okay. And he says to the people who serve Baal, he says, make sure you don't have anyone who serves Hashem among you. Make sure they're not here. They make sure they're out. Okay. And then of course, what's he going to do? Of course, he's going to, he has them all killed. Okay. He has them all killed by sword. Like he has them do their thing. Right? After they finish the sacrifice, they all get killed by sword by his soldiers. All right. And then they burn down everything that has to do with Baal worship. He wipes out Baal from Israel. Okay. So he gets rid of everything, and he killed everyone who worshiped Baal. He really did it. Like he got all of them. He killed all of them, right? So he's shown his zealousness, right? And he's shown the reader his zealousness too. He doesn't just kill people. He also wipes out Baal worship for good. Okay. Just, what Yeravam ben Nevat would do, where they would have temples to the Israelite God in the land of Israel. He didn't, he still had, and not just that, he still has, of course, the golden calves, right? That are in Bethel and in Dan. All right. That's really the big thing, that they've got those golden calves there. right? That they're worshiping. Again, this is from his point of view, this is a form of worship of God. We can argue, you say, well, the golden calves are a really real problem, but the idea to not be able to have a temple to God in your own territory would have been probably just about unheard of if you're the king of the northern kingdom and you want to worship the Israelite God. And then we have this kind of little codicil here where Vayomer Hashem el Yehu. God said to Yehu, Yan asher hetivota lasot ha'yashar be'enai kechol asher b'vavi asita levet Achav b'nei revi'im yeshvu l'chal kisei. Since you did good and you wiped out the house of Achav, you're going to have 4 generations on the throne of Israel. Okay, and it says Yehu. This is, of course, the editor who's adding this. The person who's putting all the stories together. Yehu lo shamar lalechet b'torat Hashem Elokei Yisrael b'chol levavo. He didn't keep going according to the Torah of God, of the Lord, God of Israel, with all his heart. Lo salme al chatot Yeravam asher chtiat Yisrael. He kept on with the sins of Yeravam. And so that explains why this is when Israel starts to lose territory. The northern kingdom, so it says this is when God started to take pieces of territory away from Israel, the Katzot B'Yisrael, to take pieces away from the land of Israel. Vayakem Hazael b'chol gvul Yisrael, right? The Aram under Hazael was hitting the entire the whole border of Israel. So they took Mina Yarden, Mizrach HaShemesh, and Kol Eretz HaGilad, HaGadi, Ve'eni, V'Menashi, Me'aro Eresh al Nachal Arnon, V'Gilad Bashan. They're taking the whole east, right? Aram is taking it, and so Israel loses a lot of territory. Okay, and then Yehu dies, and Yochaz, his son, rules after him, and Yehu rules 28 years, which isn't too bad. All right. So what's going on? So what is going on here? I want to say, and now we're at the end. Well, we saw, right. So we saw, this is actually a good place to stop. So what did we see in this class? All right. So we saw that Elisha, through his fulfilling of what we know of as a command to Eliyahu, right? Through fulfilling that, he really brings in a whole new political situation for the kingdom of northern Israel. On the one hand, you have Hazael, the king of Aram, who from the point of view of Arameans is a great king. He's very successful at conquering territories. And he in fact does. He does very well in conquering territories, and he takes huge pieces of northern Israel. At the same time, you have Yehu, who on the one hand, he goes in, he wipes out the Achav royal family. He really hurts Yehuda, right? He really hurts Yehuda by killing the king. And he destroys the alliances that northern Israel had with Phoenicia, right? Because he killed the whole royal family that was connected to the Phoenicians. He's killed Izebel, and he's gotten rid of the worship of Baal. I mean, the gotten rid of the worship of Baal he could have done probably without really affecting the alliance, but he's killed the princess from the north, and he's destroyed the alliance with Yehuda, right? There's no more alliance with the Davidic house because he killed the king, okay? So right now, so on the one hand, you have Aram, which is now very strong with Hazael at the head, and the northern Israel, which on the one hand, no more Baal, on the other, it's not doing well politically, right? It's isolated politically, and that's why it's very easy for it to lose land. Now, of course, Yehuda itself is weaker because they don't have Edom under them right now anymore. You see that things are going to change a little bit later on, but the alliance with Yehuda has deteriorated to such an extent that in not too long, Yehuda is going to try to go to war with Israel, with the northern kingdom. So that alliance is really pretty much shattered. So so Elisha has brought in a whole new reality. Like, you could say, has Elisha brought it in, right? If you're an actor, if you think, okay, let's take Elisha out, this just happened. Like in both situations, it's two guys who are very well situated to rebel, Okay, what's interesting is that Hazael seems like the way it's presented is Hazael. The reason Hazael even thinks of killing the king is because Elisha told him. Whereas Yehu, it's just amazing. Like on the one hand, it's a question. We can ask this question. Are we supposed to see Yehu as this just tremendously charismatic person that people were just waiting to take the reins? Because as soon as he says, hey, this prophet guy that they were calling crazy a second ago, right? They're like, who was that crazy man? A second ago, they were calling him crazy. And now that he's like, oh yeah, well, he said I'm going to be king. They're like, yay, Yehu, you're king, right? Were they just waiting for him to be king? Everyone he talks to does what he says, right? And it's only much later on where you see people starting to do things because they're afraid. But in the beginning, he just tells people, hey, just come behind me. You're asking, just go behind me. And they just do, right? He says to Jezebel's guys, who's with me? Throw her out the window. And they just do, right? Like there's this kind of, he seems to have this kind of charisma or leadership capability, or is this meant to show us that this is divinely mandated? Right? This is meant, the fact that it's so easy for him and that he just tells people to do things and they do them shows that in fact this is from God, that everything is easy for him. And it's just a kind of a paved path for him. Right. So, but the conflation of Hazael and Yehu mean a much in a final analysis mean a much weaker northern kingdom. That's what they end up resulting in. A northern kingdom without the problem of Baal, but a much weaker, a much politically weakened. Okay, and so you have right away Aram taking big chunks out of it, and something at the same time, Yehu's royal house itself seems to be pretty well established. The fact that it's able to continue for 4 generations says a lot, frankly. Any questions?
Miriam?
Yes.
I'm wondering if there's an attempt to draw some kind of literary parallel here, because we talk about the people of Yehu's followers killing the 70 sons of Achav, which sort of brings to mind Avimelech killing the 70 sons of Gidon, Shivim Ish al Even Achat. Is there, do you think?
Yeah, 70 repeats. Also, isn't it the 70? Wait. Yeah, it's 70 is a what do they call it? A typographic
number.
Yeah, it's a number that means a lot. Yeah. Right. So you see 70, but you do see it specifically with killing the sons of. You do see like 70 sons. Yeah. It means just like lots, a ton, innumerable almost. Like it's just a crazy number. Not crazy number. It's a finite number which is supposed to be very, very large. So it's a typographical number, and I think that's why you see it so much. But you do see it in this kind of situation. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Miriam, you mentioned Yehu that he weakened the alliances that Achav built, and like it's probably true, but regarding what happened with Aram, notice that in the past, many chapters, Aram have been attacking Israel all the time.
Oh yeah. No, I didn't mean that he ruined things with Aram. I mean, there were times when Aram wasn't attacking them. Frankly, there were actual periods, like historically, when they weren't being attacked so much by Aram. But yes, Aram was always a threat. What I'm saying is not that he destroyed an alliance with Aram. He destroyed some of his powerful alliances that maybe would have helped him against Aram. I don't know, because we didn't see so much in previous stories that they could call on, let's say, Phoenicians to come and help them in battle. Phoenicians wouldn't really help you in a land battle anyway. Phoenicians, maybe you could help them, ask them for help in a sea battle. But if you're already battling at sea, you're in a whole different issue. But it's true that you wouldn't have, if it wasn't maybe the best military alliance in the north. It would be more like an economic alliance, like it would be economically very valuable and less militarily valuable. But it's certainly fighting Aram. Normally, what we've seen in previous stories is that he would absolutely call on the king of Yehuda. Right? The Davidic king, they call on Yehuda, say, hey, you're my ally, come with me. They were the weaker one of the alliance, right? And they're like, okay, come with me and help me fight Aram, right? And now that's not going to happen, right? They can't.
But when the Arameans attacked, the time of Elisha and the time even before, like the Aram almost succeeded. They had miracles that saved them. With the people in the city that that magically died. Yehuda is not mentioned as helping them.
But in the previous story, it is. In other words, in the seed story, there's no Yehuda, right? But in the other stories, there is. So like, it's one of those weird things where the seed story kind of doesn't fit because you just read about Aram being defeated, right? Like it's a weird juxtaposition of stories. But you do have stories where he's going to battle and he's there with the king of Yehuda and the king of Edom who's being dragged in because the king of Yehuda is with him, right? The king of Yehuda calls the king of Edom and the three of them are battling together, right? So there is this idea that that's a military alliance that works, right? And that certainly is broken. And you could certainly say, well, there was no reason. Did you really have to break that alliance to the extent that you did? Like, couldn't you, if you just killed the king of like, it may be like maybe no matter what, if he killed the king of Israel, it would have broken the alliance. But it seems like probably he could have like drawn back and not killed the king of Yehuda. And that's an alliance that's broken. And again, it's hard for me, like I can't just say off the top of my head what it would mean to no longer have an alliance with an economic power in the north, right? Would that make him in any way more vulnerable to military attack? Maybe not. Like maybe it wouldn't have anything to do with it. It would just have an effect on the economics of the country,
So I totally agree with you. Like you're totally right. It's very interesting because I noticed all these alliances. But I also it's important just to notice to his defense that Hazael is a very strong king and he's a very aggressive king. Like we know that he destroyed Gat, and I'm saying it's also because of Hazael. Sorry.
Oh yes, 100%. And that's what I've been saying. Hazael and Yehu. Like in other words, it's both of them. That's what I'm saying. That's what that's why, and you put Elisha in the middle. And when you put Elisha in the middle, you're not really just putting Elisha in the middle. You're putting God in the middle. You're saying this situation with Hazael, who's tremendously aggressive and successful, right? And successful. He's aggressive and successful. And on the other hand, you have Yehu, and there's just no more alliances that Israel can rely on. It seems like, who knows? Seems like. Those are both from God. This is something that God wanted and that comes from God, and that Elisha as his servant was in the middle of and created. We're going to talk in the next class. We're going to kind of finish up with the end of Elisha's life, namely his death, right? We're going to talk about Elisha's death, what that says also about Elisha's political role. And we're going to talk about what we've learned by looking at Eliyahu and Elisha that we should remember as we switch to the classical prophets, because we tend to forget about these guys. Wait a second. We tend to forget about these guys when we talk about classical prophets, and they're very, very different. Their purpose is different. The way they operate is different. And it's important to kind of keep that in mind when we talk about prophecy as if it's only one thing.
Okay, and just one last comment. Sorry, short. Just very short. What everything you're saying is the biblical Yehu. If you look at this historically, we have the Stela of Tel Dan, where it looks like Hazael killed him. He's the one who killed Yoram and Ahaziah.
Yeah, and you can't. It's you don't know. First of all, the Tel Dan thing is very. If I remember correctly, when I was looking at it, was kind of fragmentary, but also, sure, like he would. First of all, he would, right? Wouldn't he do that? Like that's what he would do, right? So, like he would say,
Oh, you're saying maybe that's what he said. Okay, maybe he's just bragging, maybe. Okay.
But you're right. Like you're right. It's always this problem, right? Of who are you going to believe, right? And there is absolutely a tendency to believe the inscription. Right? There are times when the inscription's wrong, right? Israel is gone. What do you mean Israel is gone? Like, what do you like? There are times when the inscription's wrong. Now it could It could be. I mean, I'm biased. I'm so biased. So it's hard for me to say, especially when the biblical account, it's hard. It depends a lot on when this story is being written down. Is it being written down when this is in people's memories or not? Right? Because Melachim is a very long book. Like, it's got the whole thing. If this is being written down kind of generations afterwards, then you can make up stuff, right? And you can, but you'd want to, Yehu doesn't look so great, honestly. Like, I mean, I don't think it's just me. This isn't a really positive view of Yehu. If you could just have him not be the one who killed the king and just be the one who killed like the Baal, then he's great, right? And then you get and then you have the 4 generations of kings. You're like, of course he had 4 generations of kings coming. Of course he had the royal house for 4 generations. He killed all the worshippers of Baal. And instead you're like, wow, he killed a lot of people, right? And he really didn't seem to care, right? And that really does come across. So I kind of feel like if that were like, it would make more sense for the story. But I mean, and then you could just have Elisha choose Hazael and be crying, oh, you're going to kill the kings of Israel and Yehuda, and that way God's still behind everything. Like it's very easy to kind of match that, and then you don't have Yehu looking like such a psychopathic murderer. Sorry, it's really hard. I mean, it's hard to read about Yehu. Yes, Cheryl.
No, I agree. It's hard. This one line. I mean, God has just spoken to Yehu.
Yeah.
He's going to be king for 4 years in the next line, but he doesn't follow God's ways. So it's hard to understand what his motivation is or what's pushing him.
Well, again, see, that's the thing, is that there's certain statements that simply repeat with every king of Northern Israel. All right. And those statements are what you call, are clearly like, I'm not being heretical when I say there's an editor of the Book of Kings. There has to be, right? There has to be an editor, because you got. And one of the things that repeats is, and he still did according to what Yerovam ben Nevat said, right? So every one of these kings of Israel is going to do that. They all do. The best ones do. None of them drop it, right? None of them drop it. Now, in this case, it makes a point that he actually had the golden calves, which is interesting. They don't always, if I remember correctly, they don't always say the thing about the golden calves. They just say he continued in the ways of Yerovam ben Nevat. And here it's being very specific. He continued in the ways of Yerovam ben Nevat, that he kept the golden calves, right, in Beit El and Dan, which is much worse because I always tend, especially like, maybe it's just me, but when I read, and he continued in the way of Yerovam ben Nevat, I'm always like, oh yeah, he continued having temples to God outside of Jerusalem. Well, what is he going to do? What is he going to do? He's got a kingdom. You want him to worship God. Where's he going to have a temple? But here it's being very specific and reminding us that those temples have golden calves in them, right? They have idols in them, essentially. They have the wrong thing to worship in them, right? And he's keeping that up. It seems to be bringing that up in order to explain why he loses so badly to Hazael, right? That's what it seems to be doing. In other words, okay, great, he got 4 generations because he did what God wanted. So then why did they lose so much territory during his reign? And the answer is because he did continue with what Yerovam ben Nevat did. In other words, that's why he has to emphasize that, because it was such a bad reign territorially. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's what seems to be going on there. Okay, so everyone, thank you for joining me. And I will see you next week, where we talk about Elisha's death and also what we see specifically in these early prophets as opposed to what we see in what we call classical prophecy. So see you then. Have a good week. Take care, everyone.